Bonus episode time for the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Was at the first day of rookie camp. You'll get my thoughts and some words from first-round draft pick Broderick Jones, as well as some answers to your call-in questions. It's a bonus episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting app and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this YouTube channel as well as all of our different podcasting platforms for all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content with episodes like this one, where I figured I'd give you guys some extra content. Like I said, we are taking more and more calls right now as we're doing it as part of our campaign to support the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. If you call in and donate $10, and if you call in with a question, you will get your answer, your question answered on the show within a week of your donation, guaranteed. You can still call in for free at 412-223-6644. If you want to donate, go to the website that's linked at in the description of this YouTube video or podcast episode, or use the QR code on your screen if you're watching on YouTube. But let's get to some rookie camp talk here, because it was an interesting day. It was Broderick Jones and Joey Porter Jr.'s and Keeanu Benton's first day, and it was interesting to see them, kind of get their fit in. And I have to say, Joey Porter Jr. looked right at home, looked extra comfortable answering questions, as did most of the rookies. But Broderick Jones, a guy who, the first round draft pick, we talked to him a little bit, and there's been some questions. Would he be the start? Would he be the start at left tackle? Would they try to move him to right tackle? What's going to be the plan there? That question got answered pretty quickly when we had a scrum. I'm going to play for you a clip of the video that I took when we were talking to Steelers first round draft pick Broderick Jones.
Able to play any position.
What do they have you at today?
Left tackle as of right now.
So totally they want you to learn that position?
Nah, that's just through the walkthrough for right now.
Do you have that Coach Meyer's emphasis been with you so far? What's he been stressing?
Just being physical, really. Technique. Just getting that done. That's been the biggest thing.
Do you have that mindset of you're coming in and winning this job and you're the starter?
I had a mindset of coming in ready to work. I'm not looking forward to winning the job right now or doing anything. My biggest focus right now is coming in, doing the best I can do, learning the playbook, and being the best version of me.
Did you see who that first game was against? First game of the season, 49ers?
Yeah, Nick Bosa. And the 49ers. So, something to prepare for, something to look forward to. Put my best foot forward every day, working towards that day. So, just trying to get there to that point. Hopefully be the best version of me.
Were you a guy in college who would watch NFL games?
What was the question over there?
What was the best piece of advice you got coming into this whole process here?
Just grind. Continue to grind. That's really the biggest thing for me. Just staying on the grind, bettering myself every day.
And there you have it. That was Broderick Jones. Now, one thing that was asked right away, Jim Wexell, who has been on this show multiple times, he asked, what position are you going to play? And that's one of the important things to ask, because as reporters, we're not allowed to say what we see at rookie camp, but we are allowed to report what we are told. And as Broderick Jones said in that interview, he said, I'm at left tackle. But then he also said, I'm going to be playing, whatever they tell me to. He doesn't want to presume things. He's trying to say the right things as a rookie. I mean, this guy's in his early 20s coming into a professional organization. He's got a lot of things on his mind, but I can tell you right now, there's a lot of talk around him being left tackle, taking Dan Moore's spot, and then the Steelers seeing what else they do there. But you like some of the thoughts that came from him there. Talking about staying focused, talking about being excited to play Nick Bosa in the season opener. So there's a sense that he's going to be the starter. If there were any questions about Broderick Jones moving forward, they should be quelled, at least as far as projection wise. Now there could always be things that happen, injuries, guys stepping up, Dan Moore Jr. Becoming much better in training camp. It's not going to be handed to Broderick Jones. In fact, I'd anticipate, as I've said before, when OTAs open up, Dan Moore Jr. is going to be running with the first team. Broderick Jones is probably going to be running with the second team, and that'll even be the case in training camp. But when the pads go on, I anticipate very quickly in training camp, maybe a week or two, you'll see Broderick Jones ascend to the first team of the offense. So with that being said, I think that was the biggest thing there. But, I've heard some good things from Joey Porter Jr. We'll get more into that as the show when we get back to the regular episodes during the week, because there'll be more to talk about. There's also the second day of rookie camp, which is Saturday. If you're listening to or watching this on Saturday, it's going on there. I'm there as well as several of our colleagues. We'll try to get more content from that practice that we can share here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. So with that being said, let's move on. We're going to take some of your questions. Again, call in 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from, and keep your question under a minute, and we will try to get you on the show. If you call in and no donation, that's totally fine. We'll still get you on the show. But if you call in to donate, it's a guarantee to get you on the show within a week of your donation. So we've had some calls piling up here. Wanted to get a few out on this weekend update for the podcast. Here's a question from our friend Brad from Hawaii about the tight end situation the Steelers are going through. Here's Brad.
Hey, Chris, how you doing? This is Brad calling from Hawaii. Long-time listener, love the show. Hey, just a quick question. I wanted to get your thoughts maybe on the show one time about the tight end situation now that we went and picked up this tight end from Georgia, and then having Moose and also re-signed Gentry, where that leaves Connor Heyward. Last year he made a lot of great catches, and wondering if there's any designs out there to make him back into kind of like an H-back fullback that he was in college for another weapon on the offense.
Thank you for your question, Brad. And I agree that is the plan right now that the Steelers are going to deploy. The thing is this: when they drafted Darnell Washington, a lot of people were saying, and I even see the YouTube comments, why would they draft a tight end? That's just dumb. You don't know what you're talking about, Chris. They would never draft a tight end, and then they drafted a tight end, and the one I was specifically talking about. But Darnell Washington is such an athletic threat that has a really high ceiling, and I think even a really high floor with the way that he blocks, that I think that he was a really good pick as far as the value they got for him. And I think a lot of people would agree with that. Now, the question will be, what do they do with the tight ends as a whole? The Steelers value Zach Gentry. I know they didn't sign him right away, but when they signed him back with the team, signing him back guaranteed that they had a trustworthy guy who they know could come in a pinch and at least be the guy that, fills in if a starter's missing, or when you want to go triple tight end, he's going to be reliable. That's where Zach Gentry is. He's not going to be a superstar, but he'll do enough to get the job done, and he's a solid depth player. So then the question becomes, what do you do with Connor Heyward? Well, you do what our friend Brad was saying. Obviously, Brad listens to the show a lot because we talk about this a lot. And Connor Heyward's probably going to be an H-back. He's a little small to be a tight end in the first place. He's like 6'1", around that range. And Connor Heyward, I think the reason he's at a tight end is just because he's too big, and I think he's too thick and strong and to be a wide receiver. He's more of a guy you want to help with blocking, but he's too short to be a tight end. So he's kind of in that range where you're just a football player, and we're going to find a way to make you useful. And I think that's what the Steelers are saying right now. So Connor Heyward will be involved in the Steelers offense. I have no doubt about it. I think that they will definitely be using him in some way, shape, or form that way. We got more questions to get here on the Saturday bonus episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Stick with us to see if your question is coming up next. We'll be right back. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, continuing our bonus episode here after the first day of rookie camp. But again, looking at this situation and seeing how things are going to play out, there's a lot to discuss about what's going on with rookie camp. But we have some questions about how people are going to respond to some of the other guys there. Here's a question about the quarterback situation the Steelers are in, because as we know, Mason Rudolph wasn't re-signed with the team. Mitch Trubisky's still with the team, and Kenny Pickett's your presumed starter. So who's the third quarterback? Well, they brought in some names, but our friend Andy from Greencastle, PA, had a question about who's going to win that spot and maybe some outside-the-box thinking of how to fill it. Here's Andy.
Hey, this is Andy from Greencastle, Pennsylvania. I was calling about the quarterback situation. My question would be, have you heard anything or do you know anything about adding an additional quarterback since we only have Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky on the roster? I did hear a little bit about Matt Ryan wanting to sign as a mentor for a young quarterback. And with the exception of that being a little bit costly, what do you think?
Thank you for your question, Andy. Appreciate everyone who calls in at 412-223-6644 and leaves a question. I don't think it's going to be a Matt Ryan or even a Teddy Bridgewater or someone like that, unless those guys are floating around by training camp still, and the Steelers are like, yeah, we'll just take a flyer on one of those guys. But the reason, if you were watching on YouTube, the pictures that I used of the three different quarterbacks were of the three quarterbacks who were at rookie camp. Because remember, it's not just rookies, but it's also guys that are designated as tryouts, guys that aren't on NFL roster who just want to show something and see if they can get an invite to OTAs and then an invite to training camp. But the three guys that I showed were Tanner Morgan, undrafted free agent quarterback out of Minnesota. A guy I think that he's had some interesting things. He's 6'2". When you look at his build, traditional kind of, I think, camp arm type of opportunity there for him. And I think that's the other thing there is that the Steelers, because they had so many young quarterbacks recently, especially with Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph, and even going back to Devin Hodges, I think Steelers fans might forget the days of Ben Roethlisberger when he was around most of the years. You didn't have a third string quarterback that was a sure thing. Unless you had the Charlie Batch and Byron Leftwich days. Those were a different time. But there was a time where like the third string quarterback was just some guy they were bringing in and they were just hoping they'd hang along. Josh Dobbs is with the Browns, I believe, right now, so he wouldn't be there. But if you look at like Tanner Morgan, he's a guy who in his last year with Minnesota, he threw 9 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, nothing crazy. He did throw 30 touchdowns in 2019 as a sophomore, but he was not able to come close again to that later on. Another guy they brought in was actually an NFL veteran in Bryce Perkins. Perkins, a guy that's been in the NFL for a year, even started for the Rams last year in a loss through 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions, but brings you some NFL experience. I think that he could be a third string option that the Steelers are looking at. And then Hunter Johnson, which is a very peculiar prospect here because he was once a 5-star quarterback prospect that Clemson recruited and a guy that was, highly sought after out of high school, but then never really caught on anywhere. Didn't catch on at Clemson. And I believe he transferred to like Northwestern or something like that. And then that didn't work out. So this is more of a, let's just invite the guy. Let's see if he can, be a good athlete for a camp arm. Because you still need camp arms, guys that are just going to be throwing footballs for different situations to give your quarterbacks rest. Because there's a lot of activities that you do in training camp. So you just want to see, what do guys have? Who knows? Maybe one of these guys pushes to be a third string quarterback. But my bet is it's one of those guys. And if it's not, they just go into free agency and they get one around training camp time anyway. So there's my answer on that, Andy. I hope that was sufficient, but I don't think that they'll be paying. They're already paying a good amount of money for Mitch Trubisky. And I think that that's fine to do that right now because Kenny Pickett's just in his second year. You want to see how he's protected. You want to see how he deals with injuries this year, especially with the injuries he had last year. So you want to make sure that you have a decent backup quarterback. But when you're paying a decent number 2 quarterback, it's tough to shell out money for a decent number 3 quarterback as well. I think they'll try to just take who they can get in that situation. We got another question here coming from our good old friend Nathan Glass out in Los Angeles, and it's about the person who's going to be coaching that offense, Matt Canada.
Hey, Chris. Nathan Glass from California. My question for you is, how much pressure is Matt Canada under to produce this season with the weapons he has now, especially Broderick Jones and Darnell Washington at tight end? With all the weapons, can you rate it on a scale from 0 to 10, with 0 being the least pressure and 10 being the most pressure? Where do you rank Matt Canada's pressure level to produce this season? Thanks for taking my call. Have a good day.
Thank you, Nate. Always appreciate your call out from Los Angeles. How do I rate on a 0 to 10 scale how much pressure Matt Canada is in? 10, because he's got to be. And it's just a fact. If this offense does not go anywhere, he's gone. And here's the thing. If the offense is just decent this year, I still think he's gone. I think what he has to do is show that, hey, there's some serious roots taking place here. If Kenny Pickett starts really showing up, if he has some really big games this year and he's starting to feel it, then the Steelers will be like, you know what? That's our quarterback. That's the guy who we think will be the guy. He's clicking with this offensive coordinator. There's something there. We'll keep that going. But and I do think that Matt Canada, for his own career's sake in the NFL, this offense needs to be in the mid-teens. Like, it needs to at least be 16. You're hoping that it gets around 13, maybe even get to the top 12 range if they're really lucky this year. But if they get to 12 and hover around that top 10 area, I think that's the only thing that saves Matt Canada's job. But if they're hovering in the 16 to 15 area, I even say 13 would help him keep his job. But if they're hovering around 16 to 15, middle of the league, mediocre, even with, a second-year quarterback, like Nate was saying, they've invested in the offensive line. You've got a third-year running back in Najee Harris. You've got wide receivers in George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, Calvin Austin. They signed Allen Robinson. You got the tight ends and Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington. You brought back Gentry. You even got utility players like Connor Heyward. This has got to be a year where the Steelers aren't in the bottom of the league as far as offense goes. And if it's not, Matt Canada will be gone. So that's why I say it's a 10 when it comes to Matt Canada's pressure scale there. But good question there, Nate, because I think that, people think that sometimes when I don't chew Matt Canada out for something that, that everyone chews him out for, that I like Matt Canada more than anybody else, or that I just don't want to say anything bad about him. No, I don't think he's done a proficient job yet, but I also acknowledge when anyone goes through some serious challenges and the things that are associated with those challenges. And, some of the things that I think that normal people don't think about, like, hey, you know what, if I took a job and I had to rebuild a whole bunch of things, maybe I'd get some time to figure some things out before I produced my best results. And that's where I think Matt Canada has been, is that you had the old man version of Ben Roethlisberger kind of just hanging in there, trying to make things work with him, an offensive line when Kendrick Green was starting at center, and an offense that was looking for an identity. Then the offense was still looking for an identity last year as it started to figure out who they were when the offensive line started to coalesce. And then Najee Harris started to feel a little bit more. And then Kenny Pickett stepped in and started to make some plays in some big moments. And now you have semblance. There are things to work with here. There are tools at Matt Canada's disposal that show that, hey, these things can be successful. So yes, if he doesn't deliver with these tools, that's it. And I think this is what it's been building up towards. And, however you feel about Matt Canada, if he delivers, I think it's going to be a major question at the end of the season. Let's say the Steelers, let's go to the extreme. Let's say they get top 10 offense with Kenny Pickett, and everyone's talking about this. I'm like, whoa, this offense took off this year. There's a lot of people who I've heard say, like, I hope it doesn't, because I just don't want him here anymore. What are we saying here? Unless like he stole your lunch money when you were a kid, but like if the Steelers offense succeeds and he's coordinating it, why wouldn't you want him to stay there if it's successful? And on the vice versa, like if it's not good, yeah, he's gone. Yeah, the Steelers aren't just going to keep him around for no reason. But I think 3 years is a typical range for guys for especially coordinators to figure things out. If they don't, you move on, you find the next guy, but you give that coordinator a real chance to actually do something and to grow, and especially with a unit that is regrowing. If this was prime Ben Roethlisberger with Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell and Marquise Pouncey and David DeCastro and Heath Miller, and then they were ranking towards the bottom of the league, that would be a different story. But this has been a rebuilding offense. Really, I'd even say since, I'd say 2020, the end of 2020, the first half of 2020, they were playing really well. But once Ben's legs started to give out on him, and towards the back end of 2020, that's when I was like, oh man, like this is the struggle bus. And when teams realized that and took away the short pass, that was when, we saw the Steelers offense just falter at the second half of that 2020 season when they started 11-0. But Matt Canada, no such excuses this year. And I feel like even if like Kenny Pickett gets hurt or something crazy happens there, that won't save him in this situation. I think it'll just be a situation like, hey, Matt, gave you 3 years. We appreciate your services. It's time to move on with your life's work. We're going to go get somebody else, and they'll get someone that styles towards Kenny Pickett, and we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, to answer Nate's question, a 10. He needs to be hitting this year. He needs to be on point. This offense needs to soar at parts of this year. We need to see some games where they're the reason the Steelers win, not just the defense dominating and then the offense kind of poking their head in at the last minute and saying, hey guys, I'm here too. But Yes. So there you have it. There's our bonus episode. We've answered a few questions here from you. We have more questions that we'll get to later as well. So stick with us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We hope you appreciated this bonus episode. I put a lot of time into a lot of different things. You guys know I write for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. You guys know I do a lot of stuff for Channel 11, and I try to bust out this podcast here as well as other podcasts like the North Shore Drive podcast with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and the Locked On NFL podcast, where I do Fridays with the Raiders host, your boy Q. So you guys know I wear a lot of hats, which is why I can't always provide bonus content. But when I can, I try to. And I want to do this also, especially for people who want to ask more questions on the show. And if you really want to, and you want to help out the cause that I'm supporting here for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, please just donate. Even if you don't want your question answered, if you don't have a question to be answered, your donation would be appreciated. Again, use the QR code on screen or go to the website that is linked on this episode that you can find in the description, either on any of your podcasting apps or on YouTube if you're looking there. You can also go to my Twitter profile. I post a lot about it, so you can use that. There's a lot of different ways to find the link there. So if you have any questions, feel free to also just tag me on Twitter at Carter Critiques. I'll help you find it. I'll even send you the link for it. So I just want to thank everyone who does that and keep calling in. We're getting a lot of calls, and I appreciate that. And if you want your call answered, just chip in the $10. That'll guarantee that you're in the line, and we'll keep it moving. I'll be back with more on your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast as rookie camp finishes up. And then, of course, we'll be back Monday with a full episode of Locked On Steelers. We'll see you then.